The explanation might be really obvious, and somehow everyone missed it. Exegol. I've watched half a dozen videos trying to explain where the Imperial fleet went after the Empire collapsed. They all cover the same ground: Jakku, the unknown regions, logistics problems. One even pulled out a World War II tiger tank analogy that put me to sleep. But here's what gets me. You go into the comments, where the actual thinking happens, and you find people saying the same thing over and over. What about Exegol? What about the Sith Eternal fleet? And somehow, the creators just never addressed it. So let's actually talk about this. The Empire, at its peak, operated over 25,000 Star Destroyers. That number comes from Star Wars Uprising, the canon mobile game, and it tracks with older Timothy Zahn references from the Spectre of the Past novel. 25,000 capital ships, each requiring a crew of 46,785 personnel, according to official specifications. We're talking about a military operation that employed roughly 1.17 billion people just on Star Destroyer crews alone, not counting the support vessels, the bases, the logistics chains. Then Endor happened. Then Jakku happened. And the Empire just vanished. Every video wants to tell you about Jakku, how it was the last rallying point, how the Star Destroyers crashed into the sand. Fine. But let me ask you something. Where are the other 24,000 ships? The New Republic didn't destroy them all. The various warlords and remnants don't account for those numbers. The First Order, even at its height, was operating at a fraction of that scale. The math doesn't work. Unless you look at Exegol, not as a destination for those missing ships, but as a parallel drain on the same resources everyone's trying to account for. The Sith Eternal fleet consisted of exactly 1,080 Zeiston-class Star Destroyers. That's not speculation. That's canon, straight from the official source material, describing the culmination of an agenda over a decades-long conspiracy. These weren't small ships either. Each Zeiston measured 2,406 meters long, 50% larger than a standard Imperial-class Star Destroyer's 1,600-meter length. You can't retrofit something to that scale. These were built from scratch, and they were built inside the planet itself. The shipyards of Exegol operated in subterranean chambers carved directly from the rock, with hidden hangar doorways designed for eventual mass deployment. The Star Wars book confirms that his Sith Eternal fleet of Zeiston-class Star Destroyers threatens to deploy across the galaxy. But what most people miss is when construction started. By 3 ABY, 1 full year before Palpatine's apparent death at Endor, hundreds of Sith Star Destroyers were already in production below Exegol's surface. The cultists were building them while the Galactic Civil War was still being fought. While Luke Skywalker was escaping Cloud City, the Sith Eternal was forging a parallel navy in secret. That's 32 years of continuous production, 3 ABY to 35 ABY. An entire generation of ships, built without anyone in the known galaxy even knowing they existed. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and where I'm going to intentionally leave something unresolved. Some fans have thrown around figures. Hypothetically, what if 80% of the surviving Imperial fleet's resources eventually went to Exegol? Others might argue it's closer to 20%. Neither figure has a definitive source. They're the kind of extrapolations and interpretations that emerge when the canon leaves gaps. Both sides would be ready to fight about it. I'm not going to tell you who's right. What I will tell you is how the resources got there. Sith loyalists had infiltrated the executive boards of Sinar Jamis and Kuat Entrala, the exact same corporations that manufactured virtually every major Imperial warship and, later, First Order vessels. These embedded operatives made raw materials disappear. Supplies fell off the transport, as it were. Components and designs were secretly funneled to Exegol through intermediary channels without anyone in the legitimate corporate structure even realizing it was happening. The logistical chain was invisible. And that's the point. Think about what that means. For 30-plus years, a shadow manufacturing operation was bleeding resources from Imperial contractors, building a fleet of 1,080 planet-killing warships in a location so isolated that you literally needed a Sith wayfinder to navigate there. Exegol was hidden behind solar storms, black holes, and gravity wells that made standard hyperspace routes impossible. The whole thing was designed to be unfindable. And here's what makes the Zeistan fleet distinct from any missing Imperial ships theory. These weren't retrofitted vessels. The design lineage ran in the opposite direction. Canon sources confirm that the First Order's Mandator 4-class siege dreadnought was derived from the Zeistan design, meaning the Sith Eternal's weapons development was feeding technology back to the First Order, not sourcing from Imperial surplus. The axial superlaser on each Zeistan? That was a test project refined through the Mandator 4 before being deployed on over 1,000 ships at Exegol. Every single Zeistan carried a planet-destroying weapon powered by kyber crystals harvested from a mountain on the Sith world itself. One of them, the Daraphon, under Captain Shazil Sabrand, actually deployed and destroyed the planet Kijimi as a demonstration of power. These ships were created to enforce Palpatine's rule across the entire galaxy. Each one carried 72 TIE/DG starfighters, legions of red-armored Sith troopers, organized into units named after deceased Sith lords. The 3rd Revan Legion, the 5th Andedu Legion, the 26th Tenebrous Legion, and crews of 29,585 personnel each, who were raised from birth on Exegol to serve the Sith Eternal. That's 32 million people, born into service, indoctrinated from childhood, never knowing any other life. The fleet was destroyed at the Battle of Exegol when 14,000 civilian vessels arrived with General Lando Calrissian, exploiting a critical design flaw. The superlaser was connected directly to each ship's reactor. Hit the cannon, destroy the entire Star Destroyer. The Steadfast, the flagship controlling navigational signals, went down first, trapping the whole fleet in place. Every single Zeistan was annihilated. But here's my question. If Palpatine could hide 1,080 Zeistan-class Star Destroyers for 30 years, what else did he hide? And that brings us to Thrawn. Because if you want to talk about someone who understands Imperial secrets, someone who operated in the unknown regions before anyone else, Thrawn is the person to watch. The Grand Admiral spent years in exile on Peridea. He came back with the Chimera, his personal Star Destroyer. But the Thrawn who returned isn't operating at the scale we saw during the original Rebellion era, and some people have taken that to mean he's lost his edge. They're wrong. And I think the data proves it. What Thrawn demonstrated on Peridea wasn't diminished capability. It was tactical brilliance under brutal resource constraints. Think about what he was working with. One Star Destroyer, a limited crew, no supply lines, no reinforcements, no access to the shipyards and production chains that made the Empire's power possible in the first place. The man wasn't fighting like a Grand Admiral because he didn't have a Grand Admiral's resources. He was fighting like a cornered predator, economical, precise, lethal when he needed to be, and absolutely unwilling to waste anything he couldn't replace. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. And that's what makes the Exegol revelation so significant for anyone thinking about Thrawn's future moves. Consider this. The Sith Eternal fleet wasn't the only thing Palpatine was building in the unknown regions. The Emperor had been sending Imperial scouts into the unknown regions of the galaxy over the course of many decades. He was investing in expensive resources used to seed the unknown regions with storehouses, shipyards, and laboratories. This was part of the contingency, a secret plan designed by Palpatine to destroy and rebuild the Empire in the event of his death. Multiple sites, multiple caches, multiple assets. Which brings up a question that I keep seeing in comment sections. And honestly, I think it's one of the most interesting strategic puzzles in current Star Wars lore. What about the Eclipse? The Eclipse Superstar Dreadnought. In Legends, it was one of the most powerful warships ever constructed. A superlaser capable of destroying continents and cracking planetary crust, though notably not powerful enough to destroy an entire planet. In current canon, the Eclipse definitively existed. It was the first Eclipse-class dreadnought constructed, the lead ship and prototype of its class. A unique prototype Imperial superstar destroyer commissioned directly by Palpatine himself. Canon sources confirm it was destroyed in 10 ABY during the Imperial attack on Pinnacle Moon. But here's where it gets interesting. Ray Sloan uncovered evidence that the reports of its destruction may have been altered. Whether the Eclipse actually survives, that's the open question. But think about what that means for Thrawn. If there's even a chance that something like the Eclipse, or vessels of comparable power, exists in the unknown regions, hidden in one of Palpatine's caches, or incomplete at a secret shipyard, that changes everything. Now, I should be clear, there's no established canonical connection between Thrawn and the Eclipse. This is pure conjecture on my part. But his entire tactical philosophy is built around understanding cultures, systems, hidden assets. He spent more than a decade in the unknown regions, surviving in isolation. A Grand Admiral without resources is dangerous. A Grand Admiral who might find where Palpatine buried his secrets? That's a different level of threat entirely. And this is where the Filoni projects become relevant. Dave Filoni is building towards something. The Mandoverse, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, the upcoming crossover movie, has been assembling pieces for years. We've seen Thrawn return. We've seen the New Republic's political fractures. We've seen hints of what's coming. What we haven't seen yet are large-scale fleet battles. And look, I get it. Fleet battles are expensive, CGI heavy, hard to do right. But the capabilities for rendering large-scale space combat have presumably come a long way since the original trilogy. The Battle of Exegol showed glimpses of what's possible, 14,000 ships converging on a Sith armada, but it was still limited by theatrical runtime and budget constraints. What happens when Filoni gets the resources to do this properly? We're looking at a potential conflict between whatever Thrawn is assembling, and make no mistake, he is assembling something, and the New Republic fleet. We're looking at the possibility of seeing Imperial remnants, hidden caches from the unknown regions, maybe even recovered technology from Exegol's wreckage, all coming together in a way we've never seen in live-action Star Wars. The groundwork is there. The Sith Eternal proved that secret fleets could exist for decades without detection. Thrawn proved that surviving in the unknown regions requires exactly the kind of strategic patience he's famous for. The CGI capabilities exist. The story threads are converging. Whoever gets this right, whoever figures out exactly what Thrawn knows and what he's planning, is going to be proven correct when those fleet battles finally hit our screens. And that's what makes the Exegol angle so frustrating to me. Every video about the missing Imperial fleet wants to talk about logistics and maintenance cycles and how Star Destroyers were hard to crew. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that a massive parallel construction project was bleeding resources from Imperial contractors for 30 years while everyone was looking somewhere else. Here's what the canon actually establishes. The Zistons were new construction, not relocated Imperial ships. Exegol doesn't answer where the missing Star Destroyers went. It answers where a huge portion of diverted materials and corporate resources went. That's a different question entirely, but it's one that explains a lot about why the numbers never added up. The resources didn't just disappear. There was a specific, documented, canonically established program that was actively draining Imperial contractors and funneling everything to a hidden Sith world that nobody knew existed. Does that account for a majority of missing Imperial resources? Maybe. Does it account for a smaller fraction? Maybe. The honest answer is that the sources don't definitively resolve the math, and anyone who tells you otherwise is guessing. But what the sources do establish is that Exegol was real. The Sith Eternal fleet was real. The diversion of corporate resources was real. The 30-year timeline was real. That's not speculation. That's canon. And somehow, everyone missed it. What I want to know is what else is out there. What other shipyards did Palpatine seed in the unknown regions? What other caches exist that Thrawn, with his decades of experience in that territory, might already know about? What happens when a strategic genius with no resources suddenly finds resources? The debate over exactly how much went to Exegol will rage in the comments. I know it will. And honestly, good. That's how we figure this stuff out. That's how the community pressure tests theories until something breaks or holds. But the bigger question, the one that matters for everything Filoni is building toward, is what Thrawn does next. He's not diminished. He's not weakened. He's operating under constraints that would have broken anyone else, and he's still executing plans that nobody fully understands. When those constraints disappear, when he finds whatever Palpatine left behind, we're going to see fleet battles that make Exegol look like a skirmish. And I really hope we get to see them. Subscribe for more stories like this.